What is up, Knicks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Fireside Knicks with your hosts, Dylan and Ryan. And guys, the head coaching search is finally over. After about a month of not having a head coach after they fired Tom Thibodeau, they finally have landed on a guy, and that guy is Mike Brown. It's definitely an interesting hire. We have a lot to say about him. Mike Brown is a very experienced head coach, and we're going to get into his resume and all that stuff. But Ryan, first off, tell me about your initial reaction to the Mike Brown hiring, and I also hope your night is going good as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, things are going well. And look, it's a really good spot for the Knicks to be in. Again, we talked about their free agent acquisitions in Gershon Yabusele. We talk about Jordan Clarkson, the ability to add both players for under or around $8 million in salary towards the salary cap. And we sit here now, we're going to be able to talk about the Knicks having a head coach. If you ask us where the Knicks were at 2 weeks ago versus today, I think the national media was a lot more negative and pessimistic than we are. I think for the most part, there wasn't really a mass panic on this channel regarding the Knicks and their ability to find a head coach. But Mike Brown, he isn't a perfect coach, but he is a two-time Coach of the Year winner. He has a near 60% win percentage in the NBA. He's been to the NBA Finals. Dylan, he is an impressive coach. He is an impressive coach. And, when people talk about, can you win a championship with this guy? Can you win a championship with that guy? You never really know until you do it, right? I'm sure there are plenty of championship caliber coaches who have never won anything at the NBA level in terms of the NBA Finals. And I'm sure there are guys who aren't championship caliber coaches at this point in their careers who have. Would you consider Doc Rivers a championship caliber head coach in the year 2025 more so than Mike Brown just because he won a title in 2008 with the Boston Celtics when I was 3 years old and when they had, some of the most talent in the league? No. Do you consider Mike Budenholzer more of a NBA championship caliber head coach than than Mike Brown because of what he did with the Bucks? No, I don't, and that's not a specific diss on Mike Budenholzer. He's had some personal reasons as to why maybe he hasn't had some postseason success at times, but Mike Brown's lack of a championship does not concern me in the slightest. I would rather the Knicks hire someone that doesn't have a championship than someone who's riding the coattails of a championship. His win percentage speaks for itself. And finally, the most important thing to me, Dylan, the resume he has with offense. I was very hesitant at first when Mike Brown's name first came up and mentioned it on this show to fully wrap my arms around him because of the defensive ineptitude that the Kings showed underneath him and the inability to play Keon Ellis. But I would point to the fact that the Kings' defensive personnel just kind of stunk. And with Keon Ellis, here's what I'll say. I still think it's bad that he didn't play him to the extent that he should have. But I also think you can look at any good NBA coach and say, why did they do this? Why did they do that? I'd like to point to the Thunder and the way that they managed the final minutes of Game 1. I'd like to point to the Thunder and the way they kind of played at times in the postseason and optimized their roster and playing time in the postseason. I believe it's Mark. I think it's I can't pronounce it. It's Diagonal. Diagonal. Sorry, I'm really, again, very bad with names. But I could point to a lot of mistakes he made to the postseason. Is he a championship caliber head coach? He just won a championship, so I'd say yes. But again, it just all stems back to overall track record, overall resume. The overall resume is very strong with Mike Brown, and so I'm very happy with this hire. Dylan, what are your thoughts on Mike Brown and what he could bring to the Knicks?
I mean, I feel like when he got hired, the fan base was kind of split. A lot of people were happy with the hire, but a good amount of people also said it was a bad hire. I personally think this is a great hire, and the reason I say so is for a lot of the reasons you outlined. The resume is very impressive in its own, but even as a modern-day coach, he's shown that he can make a team a really good offensive team, and I think the Knicks needed to improve that a lot this summer. I think they did. I think they've already done that by adding two guys that average points in double figures in free agency, in Jordan Clarkson and Gershon Yabusele, and now they just got a head coach who's going to be able to maximize Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns offensively, and I think that is extremely significant. I think that's very important to point out because, I felt like under Tom Thibodeau, especially in the postseason, those two guys were not maximized. Those two guys were not in the action enough times together to really kind of get like the feel that you have two all NBA level scorers on the floor together. Under Mike Brown, I think he's gonna make sure that those two guys are really involved almost every single play, and I also think it'll help guys like Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby also be more impactful offensively. I know I know OG took a leap offensively this past year. Mikal Bridges was pretty on and off, but I think those guys will be a lot more consistent and be a lot more involved as well. I think the overall offensive flow is going to be really good. They're going to pass the ball a lot more. They're going to be looking for other guys a lot more, getting involved in action. The Knicks as a team the past year or so, and even under Tom Thibodeau entirely, they were never known to be a passing team. They were never known to play fast or anything like that. Mike Brown is one of those guys who likes to play his team fast, and he really emphasizes ball movement. And I think that's extremely important for the Knicks right here in this situation. The defensive concerns are definitely valid. He's not, he's kind of shifted his ways. Originally, he was very much of a defensive-minded coach during his early days, such as when he was in Cleveland and led that team to an NBA Finals and all that stuff. Now he's kind of shifted gears a little bit and is more offensive-oriented, but I think that's a good thing. I think in this day and age, the teams with the high-powered offenses win more often. You want to have a good defense. I'm not going to act like you want to have a bad defense, but no, you can get away with having I guess not top of the line defense if you have the best offense. You know what I mean? You can really put up some points and play above average defense, and that can get you far. It really can. And I think where the Knicks are positioned right now, you want to maximize the offensive firepower you have. Like I just said, you have 2 All-NBA scorers on your team. You got to get those guys involved as much as you can. You can't just waste that opportunity of having those 2 guys on the floor together. Not many teams have that luxury of having not only 2 All-NBA level scorers together, but also having elite complementary pieces as well. Look at the Boston Celtics. They just had to blow it all up after they couldn't afford to keep that team together. And we all know how well-rounded that team looked on paper. I mean, they won a championship just a year and a half ago. So, it's pretty clear that teams that can score a lot of points are the ones that are going to win a lot of games. And I do think the Knicks are going to definitely increase their win total this upcoming season with Mike Brown. I expect more postseason success. And now I understand he hasn't won a playoff series in like over a decade, but either way, I think this is easily the best team Mike Brown has had since that Cavs team, and I wouldn't even say that Cavs team was even better than this Knicks team. I would argue that LeBron James was just carrying that team full of, a bunch of scrubs. So, whether that's an indictment on Brown or LeBron, that's a discussion that you guys can have on your own on that. But looking with this Knicks roster in that situation, I think this is a really good situation that Brown is heading into. The team just came off a conference finals appearance for the first time in 25 years. They just added some key pieces in free agency. They're ready to take the next step. I think they're in a great position to do exactly that. I'm excited for what Mike Brown can bring to the table. I think he's going to bring some more energy, be a good voice to have in the locker room and on the sidelines. And overall, I think this is a good hire. I personally see no issues with it. I know they had a bunch of different candidates that they were looking at, and there were some other personal favorites out there. I'll even admit it right here on this show. My personal favorite was Taylor Jenkins. I wanted them to go get him. But I'm not upset about Mike Brown at all. I think Mike Brown is a very qualified candidate. I think he's got, he's checked all the boxes and all that stuff. So I'm excited for what he can bring. That's really what I got to say about the initial reaction, though. But what I do want to ask you, Ryan, looking ahead towards next season and stuff like that, what would be considered success? Because I've seen some people suggest that the only way that this hire is successful is if the Knicks win the title next year. And I think that's an interesting conversation to have. So I want to get your input on that.
I think next year is crazy talk. Like, not saying that next year the Knicks cannot win the finals, but I think a coach deserves more than 1 year. Would I consider it a failure if the Knicks go to the NBA Finals, lose in 6 or 7 games to a very good Western Conference team? Let's say the Thunder get back there. Let's say the Nuggets, who look very formidable, although Jonas Valanciunas decided, I'm going to go play overseas, I think. And even the Houston Rockets, another formidable roster. If one of those 3 teams got to the finals, and there are other strong teams in the West as well you can't discount, but just giving examples here, and the Knicks losing 6 to 7 games, is it a failure of a season? No, that's crazy. That's crazy talk. Now, if the Knicks get swept in the Eastern Conference Finals by the Cavs, is the season a failure? Sure, but am I going to fire my head coach? Probably not. Probably not fire my head coach over that. And I know people are going to say, well, the bar is getting to Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. That's where you got last year, so you have to do better than that the year following. I do believe that the Knicks have shown that results are important, but they care more about the process and how you get there. I believe the Knicks, and I think fans should be cognizant of this, the way in which the Knicks got to the Eastern Conference Finals is not a way you want to try and rely on going to the Eastern Conference Finals every year. You don't want to rely on 20-point comebacks. You don't want to rely on miracle matchups. You don't want to rely on really spotty and inconsistent play. This team played like crap on their way to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think that's the best way to put it. They played very ugly Jekyll and Hyde basketball for an entire month, basically, and a more consistent, well-oiled machine in Indiana came in, rolled in, and dominated the New York Knicks. So I think that, again, if they lose in the Eastern Conference Finals and get swept, that's bad. It's a failure of a season, but a failure of a hire, I think that deserves. You need to wait through the entirety of that coaching tenure or contract to play out. Now, one thing I did want to point out, Dylan, and I think it's important to note is you did mention the stat of Mike Brown has not won a playoff series in quite some time as the head coach. He played Golden State his first year with the Kings, and Golden State won in 7 games, and that Kings team had zero business being there based on their preseason expectations. No one expected the Sacramento Kings to host a playoff game, and be a top 4 seed in the Western Conference that year. The year following, you could say, well, that's a letdown year. They won 46 games, and they just didn't. It's just a tough Western Conference. And again, this is a team that had a very clear ceiling. They were not a championship caliber roster, and then it kind of all fell apart this year. And you can, again, put part of that blame on Mike Brown with Keon Ellis and not playing him enough. But were they Keon Ellis away from winning the finals? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it's important to note that De'Aaron Fox asked for a trade when Mike Brown was fired. I don't believe he necessarily lost the locker room the way that some coaches have. You could point to, as you mentioned, the Cleveland Cavaliers and his tenure with LeBron and the Cavs. How many times can you sit back and say the Cavs did not win the finals when they were supposed to? There are years where they didn't go to the finals when they were supposed to, but even then, a lack of depth in the NBA typically results in playoff burnouts. His time with the Lakers, very brief, and they also handed him a very not great roster, and a roster that just, I'm sorry, they did not play like a team that should be in the finals, a team that deserved to be in the finals or should win a finals, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't necessarily believe that his coaching record is bad given the circumstances. I don't know the team that he was given that should flat out have won the finals and didn't. I don't know what team that is. And so this may be his best roster ever. This might be his best roster ever. Maybe you want to argue for the Cavs team that won 66 games in 08 and 09. That was a disappointing year for the Cavs in terms of postseason play. But again, that roster sucked. Like, outside of LeBron, that team sucked. And I know people are going to say, well, LeBron's a huge variable here. Can't win with one superstar in the NBA. Don't know. I can't think of a recent champion to win with one superstar and a bunch of horse crap on the roster. So I like his coaching resume. I think that the more damning note is that Tom Thibodeau has lost, 7 playoff series as a higher seed. I believe in every time the Knicks have been eliminated in the postseason, they have lost to a lower seed. I think that's way more damning. How do you lose to Indiana twice? How do you lose to Miami? How do you lose to Atlanta? And mind you, the Atlanta series was over before they got to Game 5. That Miami series fell over before they got to Game 6. The second Indiana series was over. O-V-E-R, over, after 2 games. Right? After 2 games. You blew the league in Game 1, you lose Game 2. No team has ever won an Eastern Conference Finals after going down 2-0-2 and being the team that lost both games at home. It never happened. Never. That series was over. And then you want to look at the first Indiana series. I'm not going to put that on Tibbs. I won't put that one on Tibbs. I think that's hilariously unfair. So that's more damning to me than Mike Brown lost to the Celtics, the super team Celtics. Mike Brown couldn't beat Steph Curry. Steph Curry dropped, 50 in Game 7? Steph Curry had one of the greatest performances I've ever seen in my lifetime. Yeah, you're not going to... I'm sorry that Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox, and friends couldn't beat Steph Curry. I'm so sorry. Maybe you know what? That's an embarrassment beyond belief. So, yeah, I just, Dylan, the flaws of Mike Brown are real. He's not perfect. But his coaching record's not nearly as damning as Tom Thibodeau's in the postseason.
Yeah, and as you just alluded to, too, I mean, like you said, this is the best roster I think that Mike Brown has ever gotten, or at least that he's inheriting, because, the situation is there for him. The team is set up to win a title. They just made the Eastern Conference Finals. There are people that have said that the Knicks roster is not a championship contending roster. I beg to differ on that, because the championship contending roster doesn't beat the reigning champion, who were healthy before Tatum got hurt. I understand Tatum got hurt and whatever, but they were going to go up 3-1 before he got hurt. So there's no injury excuse there. They had beaten the Boston Celtics pretty much while they were healthy, right? So a championship contending team doesn't knock off the reigning champion like that, and they don't even push Indiana to 6 really in that situation, given the circumstance of blowing Game 1, losing both games at home, yet they still forced Game 6 when they easily could have gotten swept or fizzled out, whatever. Shown that they didn't belong. No, they showed that they do belong. They just needed they needed a change in some way. They had to go in a different direction. And that direction was either to, move on from Cat or someone else on the roster that was important, or change the head coach. They obviously went with the head coach route. They changed the head coach. Now we have a different voice. And again, I think Mike Brown is qualified. Clearly, he impressed the Knicks brass enough to where they feel like he is the guy who can lead them to the promised land. The Knicks front office is pretty smart. I feel like some people are kind of questioning their abilities over the past year just because, they traded away Julius Randle for a big cat contract. Obviously they didn't bring back Obi Toppin. They traded him for 2 second-round picks. People question moves like that. All GMs and presidents make questionable moves all the time. But the Knicks front office is pretty smart. They usually press the right buttons, and they usually make the decision that is the right one for the better of the team, right? And they've already demonstrated that with the 2 free agent signings. I think those were very good signings, given what the bench was last season. You absolutely needed to add some scoring off the bench, and I think they added 2 of the better ones that were available on the market. And it was at an affordable price. It wasn't at a ridiculous price. It was at a good price for them to pay. They're not over the second apron or anything like that. They're in a good spot. And I do think that that's really beneficial for them. So, just looking ahead with Mike Brown and stuff like that, the roster he's got, I think this team can really, really do something offensively. I'll put a bold prediction right now and say that the New York Knicks will be a top 3 offense next season. And maybe that doesn't sound too bold because they were on pace to be that before the second half of last year. But I think they're pretty much well on track to be a top 3 offense next season. I think it's definitely going to happen with under Mike Brown and, the way he plays his pace, the way he, emphasizes ball movement and shooting and things like that. The Knicks have the pieces to do it. They have the personnel. I think they're in a really good spot. I'm expecting some fun offense, honestly. Now, it's not going to be perfect, as you were saying. I mean, Mike Brown is not this, God-sent head coach. He's not Steve Kerr. He's not Greg Popovich. He's not Phil Jackson. He's not any of those guys. But he's experienced. He's been around for a while. He's seen every single level of the NBA. He's been, on bad teams. He's been on good teams that have made the finals. He's won championships as an assistant coach, too, which I think is important because that is valuable experience right there. So he's checked all the boxes. He's been there. He's done that. He knows how this game works. He's evolving as a head coach himself. He's a younger voice. He's more energetic. He's not like Tom Thibodeau, who, is pretty mellow and then he'll just start screaming. No, Mike Brown is vocal. He will express everything. He'll make sure that his game plans are getting to the player's head. So I think that's really important. And I'm pretty sure the players had some input on this too. I would be a little surprised if any of the players on the roster were not filled in on the head coaching search throughout this process, and I would be willing to bet that that pretty much all those guys are in full support of this hire. And if that is the case, if they are bought into the product, that's only better for us. You know what I mean? And, to really kind of backtrack to my original point about whether or not if they win a title this year, is it a failure? I'm indifferent on that topic because I feel like on one hand, firing him after one season would be a little much, right? But on the other hand, we're done messing around. We're done waiting for that time to come where we win a title. We've waited 5-6 years now for, us to be in a good position to actually do something. I'm not waiting around. And if they end up losing in the playoffs because of Mike Brown, it's a conversation to entertain. It is. Now, I don't want to go through another revolving door of head coaches either, so, it's very up and down. I'm very indifferent on that situation, and I think it's better to kind of really see how this team looks throughout the season when it does begin in a few months to really kind of get a gist of whether or not they should end up winning a title or not. But it's like I think that they should win a title under this head coach. I really feel like they should. I really do. But at the same time, firing him after one season could be much. But at the same time, it's like, do we really want to believe that we haven't hit the ceiling yet? You know what I mean? It's a very difficult conversation to have, and it's one of those topics we'll be able to discuss more in depth later on in the year and when the season actually begins. But before we do wrap the episode up, because I think we're about to approach 20 minutes on this, so I do want to wrap this up shortly. Ryan, what is your bold prediction for next season with the Knicks under Mike Brown? I said they'll be a top 3 offense. What do you think they'll do? Do you think they might win 60 games? Do you think they'll win a championship? Anything else that may happen? What do you think might happen?
So if the season started today, so I'm saying if the season started today with the current rosters, I believe the New York Knicks will match up with the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals. At that point, I don't know what will happen from there. I think that is the floor for me. That is what is tolerable. Now, if they get swept again, as I mentioned, that would be considered a failure for me. But if they lose in 7 very competitive games, it'll hurt. It'll sting. I'll cry about it probably, but hard to consider that a failure if you lose to what I think is, well, the team that's going to look at themselves as the best team in the Eastern Conference going into the season in Cleveland. And I think the Knicks will, if you ask me to be a betting man like today, Ryan, who do you think will win the Eastern Conference Finals if the Cleveland Cavaliers played the New York Knicks? I'd pick the Knicks. I think the Knicks are a better team. I think the Knicks are just marginally better. It's not a confident better, but very marginally. Maybe a little bit biased as well. But again, I would sit here and say my prediction, I think the Knicks win 57 games, 58 games, and win and goes to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think, again, for this season to be a success, it's hard to go to the finals and have a failing season. It really is. Unless you play a team that stinks in the finals or relative to you, they're not very good, and you lose to them, that's a failure. But if the Knicks got to the finals again, they play the Thunder, and they lose in 7 or lose in 6, and it's a very competitive series. What am I going to sit here and say, Dylan? Like, failure of a season, fire everyone, Mike Brown stinks, get rid of this guy, get rid of that guy, I'd go, run it back. I'd say it's a missed opportunity, but I'd say run it back. So, prediction, 58 wins, Eastern Conference Finals appearance at the minimum, and I think the ceiling for this team for the first time, really, I'm not sure if I've ever felt this going into the year. I think this team can win the finals. I wasn't sure about that last year, and I quickly abandoned that take in January once Oklahoma City started playing the way they did, and it looked like I thought Boston and Cleveland were just going to outclass us. This year I feel like, the Knicks should be considered clear-cut finals contenders.
Yeah, and I'm going to even make another bold prediction here. This team's going to win 60 games next year, and they're going to be the 1 seed in the East. And the reason I'm going that far is because we know what this team is capable of. Now they've gotten a full year together, right? Now they have a head coach who emphasizes offense. This team is going to light up the score sheet. And with the Eastern Conference being as wide open as it is now, with Boston not being as good likely, Milwaukee is in a weird situation. Teams like that, they are really going to run this Eastern Conference. I think the New York Knicks right now, as we stand, should be the betting favorite to win the Eastern Conference. Matter of fact, they should be. You could argue that they should be up there for the betting favorite to win the finals. Now, naturally, you're going to give that betting favorite to the Oklahoma City Thunder because they just won the title, and they also are going to bring back a lot of those guys, right? But I think this New York Knicks team is capable of doing it. I really do. Watching the Oklahoma City Thunder in the finals, even throughout the playoffs, look very volatile. They definitely look beatable in some ways. I think the Knicks have a chance. I really do. Now, I know that's an extreme expectation to put on a first-year head coach and all that stuff, but that's what a bold prediction is all about. A bold prediction is meant to be pretty bold. It's not meant to be super realistic or anything like that. I think realistically, this team probably will at least make the conference finals. That should be the expectation, and I would like to think that they'll make the finals this time around. They would like to improve off of last year. But my bold prediction is going to be that they're going to win 60 games. They're going to make the NBA Finals. And I won't go as far as say they're going to win it just yet. I'm not going to do that just yet. I want to see how it plays out on the court, and I'll probably save that prediction for right during training camp, right before the season, when I really kind of have a better feel of the roster and how the head coach is getting along with the guys and all that stuff. But early off-season prediction, like I said, they will do exactly what I said. 60 games, be the 1 seed in the East. They will make the NBA Finals. Again, high expectation, but the pressure is on. And you know what? Mike Brown loves that pressure. He even said it. He wants this. He wants the pressure. He enjoys it. He feeds off of it. I think that's a great mentality to have. I think they picked the right guy. I'm excited for what Mike Brown brings to the table. I'm excited for what the Knicks do next season. I think this is the best chance that I have felt personally that the Knicks are going to win a title in my lifetime. I mean, even this past season, I didn't really think they were going to end up doing it. I really didn't think so. Even if the Knicks did advance past Indiana this past season, I didn't think they were going to beat Oklahoma City. I really didn't. Maybe they had a chance, but I realistically didn't think they would do it. But that's really all I got to say about that. I do think this is a good place to finally wrap the episode up. Let us know what you think about the Mike Brown hire in the comment section below. I'm sure a lot of you guys will have a lot to say about that hire, so we'd love to hear about it and talk with you guys about that stuff. You can also follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course this YouTube page that you just watched the video on. You can also listen to the audio version of this on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure you give us a 5-star rating on those. You can follow me and Ryan's personal Twitter accounts. They're right there above our heads. And we will see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out and let's go Knicks.